It had been weeks since I first noticed the strange messages. They were subtle at first. Simple compliments about the way I looked while sitting at my desk, or how I seemed to carry myself in meetings. It didn't take long for them to escalate, though, each one growing bolder, more personal. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, maybe someone messing with me. But the messages didn't stop. In fact, they started coming more frequently. The worst part was, I knew I was being followed. I'd caught glimpses of someone watching me from the corner of my eye during breaks. Always keeping a distance, never approaching. Always vanishing when I turned around. The uncomfortable feeling built over time, until it was no longer something I could ignore. I had to confront it, and that's when I found out the truth. Standing in front of me was Lucas Carter, the one person I never expected to be behind the strange behavior. He was my boss. Tall, dark-haired, and attractive in that dangerous way that people with power often are. But he wasn't just attractive, he was intimidating. His piercing brown eyes were always cold, unreadable. He didn't look at me like a colleague or even a friend. No, Lucas looked at me as if I were something he needed. When I walked into his office that afternoon, fully intent on confronting him, he didn't look surprised. He just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk on his lips. "Corey," he said my name with such an odd finality, as if he'd known I'd come to him. "I've been waiting for you." My mouth went dry. I stood there, staring at him, trying to process what was happening. Lucas had been sending me those messages? And the stalking, it was him all along? "Why did you send those messages?" I finally managed to ask, my voice unsteady despite my best effort to sound calm. His expression didn't change. If anything, the smirk widened. "You know why, Corey," he said, standing up and taking a couple of steps toward me. "It's obvious, isn't it? What I want is clear." I froze. He was so close now, close enough that I could feel the heat of his presence against my skin. I wasn't sure if I was scared or if something else was happening, something I couldn't quite place. "Lucas, this isn't funny. You've been following me, sending me messages." "It's wrong," I said, but my words faltered as his eyes bored into mine. "I never said it was funny," he replied, his voice low and calm, but there was an intensity there, one I couldn't ignore. "But maybe it's exactly what you need." I felt a shiver run down my spine, and my heart began to beat faster. What was I supposed to say? What was I even supposed to do now? He wasn't just a boss. He was someone I barely knew, someone who had crossed boundaries I hadn't even realized existed. And yet, there was something undeniably magnetic about him. "I don't want to play this game," I said, my breath shallow. But even as I said it, part of me wondered if I was lying. Lucas didn't back away. Instead, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from my face, his fingers lingering a little too long. The touch was so intimate, so personal, that it left me reeling. "I can make it worth your while, Corey," he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I can make it real, everything you've been feeling." I wanted to step back, to escape this situation, but I found myself rooted to the spot. What was he saying? Was this some twisted game? The intensity in his gaze was overwhelming, and all the rational thoughts in my head seemed to vanish. "Corey," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper now. "I know you feel it too. That tension, the attraction. You've been wondering what this could be, haven't you?" I opened my mouth to protest, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know what I wanted. Was it fear? Desire? Confusion? Maybe it was all of it, wrapped into one impossible feeling. I stood there, paralyzed by the storm of emotions inside me, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't sure what to do. I started, but Lucas silenced me, placing his fingers against my lips gently. "You don't have to say anything, Corey. I can already see it in your eyes," he said softly, and his thumb brushed against my bottom lip. It felt like everything was happening too fast, too suddenly. My thoughts were a blur, a swirling mass of confusion and uncertainty. But one thing was clear. I wasn't sure how to escape this. How could I escape something that I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to run from? I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in Lucas's presence. Every part of me wanted to pull away, to escape this strange, uncomfortable interaction. But there was a part of me, an undeniable part, that wanted to stay, to let the moment play out. My body felt like it was caught between two worlds, one where I should leave, and one where I felt like I was being drawn into something I didn't fully understand. Lucas's gaze didn't waver. He stood in front of me, that same faint smile still lingering at the corners of his lips, as if he knew exactly what was happening in my mind. "I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "but I want you to think about it. Think about what we could have together. No more games. Just honesty. What do you think, Corey?" I swallowed hard, trying to clear the haze that had descended over my thoughts. His words rang in my ears, but they made no sense. How could I even begin to think about what he was suggesting? Was I really considering it? Was I that desperate for connection? Or was I just afraid to say no? I took a step back, the space between us growing, but not enough to break the tension. My heart was racing, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I either said something I couldn't take back or walked out, feeling more lost than ever. I don't know what to think, Lucas," I said, my voice shaky, my hands trembling by my sides. "This isn't something I ever expected. You're my boss. This feels wrong." Lucas's expression softened, and for the first time since we'd started this conversation, he seemed almost vulnerable. It was like I had just cracked the surface of something deeper, something he hadn't shown anyone before. "I know it's complicated," he said quietly, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But that's life, Corey. Life is complicated. And sometimes you have to take a chance. What we could have, it's real. You just have to decide if you're willing to see it through." There was a heaviness to his words, a weight that pressed against me like a silent plea. He wasn't just offering me a chance for something casual. No, he was offering me something much more. And I could feel that in the way he spoke, in the way he looked at me. It wasn't just attraction. There was something else, something deeper, maybe even more dangerous. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I can't think about it right now. Everything about this is too much. I don't know if I can trust you." Lucas didn't seem angry or frustrated. Instead, he nodded, as if he'd expected this response. His fingers dropped away from my lips, but he didn't step back. He just stood there, watching me with those steady, intense eyes, as though he was waiting for something. "Take your time," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But know that I'm not going anywhere, Corey. I'm here. And when you're ready, I'll be waiting." I turned quickly, eager to escape the tension that had wrapped itself around me like a suffocating cloud. I needed space, needed time to breathe, to think. My mind was racing, every possible scenario running through it, and none of them made sense. How could something so simple, so innocent, have turned into this confusing, dizzying mess of emotions and decisions? As I walked out of Lucas's office, the door clicking shut behind me, I felt a strange emptiness settle in the pit of my stomach. What had just happened? I needed to get away, but the pull of that encounter, of Lucas's eyes, his words, kept tugging at me. I made my way down the hall, my steps quick and purposeful, but my thoughts were still trapped in that room. The way Lucas had spoken to me, like he knew exactly what was happening inside me, like he understood everything I was feeling, even the things I didn't understand myself. I paused at the elevator, my finger hovering over the button. I could go home, leave all of this behind me and pretend it never happened. Or I could stay, and try to figure out what had just shifted between us. What did it mean? The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. But as the doors slid shut, I realized something. I didn't know what to do next. My mind was still tangled in a mess of uncertainty, and the only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't stop thinking about him. Not about the messages, not about the games, but about Lucas, about what it all meant, and how it felt like something had changed in that room. Something unspoken, but undeniably real.